Hello, my name is Charlie Miller, alongside the transcriber Mary Miller, interviewing Edgar Rosales. Today's date is January 29th, 2022, and we are in Berkeley, California. The purpose of today's interview is to honor Edgar's service to the United States. I'm a volunteer with the Library of Congress, and we are working on the Veterans History Project. So the first thing I'm going to ask you, just kind of some biographical information with kind of like your date and place of birth, that sort of stuff.
So I was born in Green Bay in Marin. I was born in 1995, June 14th is my birthday. And yeah, I was raised in Richmond, California in the East Bay, so across the bridge. And yeah, I think that was the question. Those questions, right?
Yeah, that's perfect. What were your names of your parents and I guess their background, and did they serve in the military, or kind of what your motivation to join the service was?
Yeah, so my parents, they immigrated to the United States from Mexico in the late 80s. So both of them are undocumented. So they got here, they had us in, 1995. So in the to the early to mid 90s. I'm the youngest of four. My mom's name is Rosa Maldonado, and then my dad's name is Miguel Rosales, Sr. Yeah, so I'm the youngest of four. My brother, I have two brothers and one sister. I have a half brother. He's the oldest. He's 31. His name is Alexis. He lives in LA. He actually plays for the Las Vegas and the LA Philharmonic.
Cool.
Yeah. And I like to show him off once in a while. And then I have another brother who he is 29. No, he's 27. 28, I don't know his age. And he is studying right now to be an engineer. And then I have a sister. She is 29. She's the one who's 29. And she works in retail. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so we grew up in Richmond. In my household, it was just my brother who's studying to be an engineer, and then my sister. So it was just us three.
Cool. What type of schooling did you have before you entered the military, kind of like high school or college? Right.
So I guess I'm going to tie in a little bit of your last question of what motivated me. So I went to middle school in Surfell. I went to Davidson. Mm-hmm. And then from Davidson, I moved to, always lived in Richmond, but my mom worked in Surfell. So for high school, I went to Richmond High. Mm-hmm. And then after Richmond High, I went to Kennedy. And then after Kennedy, I moved around a little bit. We moved to like 4 different houses in Richmond within like 2 years. Mm. So during this time, which is kind of ironic. So at the time, my dad got deported. He got deported. Mm-hmm. He worked in landscaping. Mm-hmm. So he got deported, and he was the main breadwinner of the family. So when that happened, my family became homeless. So we lived with my uncle.
Wow.
And but ironically, I always had this, I guess this calling of wanting to serve. I always liked serving people. I always liked protecting people and fighting for the little guy per se. And I was really into video games too. So I played a lot of Call of Duty, mm-hmm. and I played a lot of that. And I was like, wow, this seems really cool. I was never part of a team. I never played sports. I did a lot of running, but I never really played sports. And I was like, if I want to be a part of a team, and maybe joining the military would give me that fulfillment of being part of a team. And it was a mixture of that, and it was a mixture of looking for some kind of out, right? Like I want to, how can I get through college? How can I pay for college? Mm-hmm. How can I, better my family? How can I, give my kids, a better life than the one I had? Mm. And then the military was that solution for me.
Yeah, that's great.
I was just going to say, it's obviously ironic that you're attracted to the U.S. military, and obviously the U.S. government was
right.
Probably difficult for your father. So can you talk a little bit about kind of that pull and push?
You're right, exactly, and that's a very good question, or I guess something to kind of talk about, just because there was a lot of conflict there, right? I was like, the government deported my dad. And that kind of put me in this very, bad situation. My family in a really bad situation. And I'm sure there was a lot of resentment. But, for some reason, I was still always very patriotic. I always loved my country. And I always, I knew, I guess essentially, I think I know the reason why is because I knew how the situation was in Mexico. And I knew that my parents came to this country to give us a better life. And I knew that they took a risk, for us to have that opportunity. And, no matter what the situation was, I'm a person who doesn't like to generalize. So I know that, they were doing what they had to do, and that's what happened. But even till this day, I still have that, not a chip on my shoulder, but I always think about that. But, and in terms of what I do now, which I'll get into a little bit later, I make sure that there's at least some representation in the federal government who can speak for these communities and can, just give them a perspective. And I think that, I guess that's how how do you say it? I guess that's just how I cope with it, where I know that I can be an agent of change because I've gone through this, and I know that, the government is a government. It's a government. They're not people. It's very much like a corporation in terms of, it's not a living thing. So, people work it's like a machine where, sometimes you have to go through protocols and procedures and laws. There's laws you can't break. And when you break them, there's consequences. So, yeah. And I think the reason why I joined the military was just because it was something I always wanted to do. And I've always lived by this mantra, I guess, of live my life without any regrets, or, live my life without thinking that what if I did this, what my life would have been? What if I did this experience? And I remember when I was going to join the military, it took me like 6 months to really think about it. And I was like, if I do this, what's going to happen? There's a possibility that I might die, because I knew I wanted to join combat. I wanted to join a job or MOS that involved combat. And I knew that if I joined, there's a possibility that I might die. But I thought about, what if I don't join? And then 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'm going to look back and I'm going to be, man, what my life could have been if I joined. Yeah. That's a regret I'm always going to have. So, I adopted that, and I said, okay, well, I'll see how it is. I'll try my best. And, if something bad happens, and it's out of my control. So, yeah, I just kind of rolled the dice, and I figured that, I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't join, so I joined.
So can you tell us a little bit about where you went to enlist, and I guess what branch you thought fit for you?
I enlisted in Pleasant Hill, Concord. There used to be a recruiting area across the mall. Sunnyvale, I think that's what it's called, Sunnyvale Mall. I'm not quite sure, but the one that's in Concord. There was a recruiting station there, and there's also a recruiting station in Hilltop. And so I went to the recruiting station first in Hilltop, and I was always interested in the Army because I wanted to be in special operations. And I was like, okay, I want to do something in terms of SF, Rangers, so I'm gonna go to the Army. And then the Army, when I got there in Hilltop, the Army's office was closed, and then the Marines was open. So I went to the Marines recruiting office. And then, I felt like it was I was negotiating. I always felt like I was negotiating when I went there. And then I went, and then I was talking to one of the Marine recruits, and then he was all like, so you want to join the military? And I was like, I do. And then he's like, you think you got what it takes? And I was like, I think so. And then he started pushing me. He's like, no, you don't. This, and, trying to I guess pressure me into joining. And then he was like, you don't have what it takes. And I was like, okay, then I'll leave. And then I left. And then I guess it was counterproductive because I knew that, essentially they have a quota. And I know that, that I scored pretty high on the ASVAB, which is the test you need to take to get a job. And I knew I had leverage. And I was like, man, also I'm pretty athletic. I run, you have a 2 mile for the Army. And I think for the Marines, it might be 2-3 mile run you have to do. My mile time, even now, it's 7 minutes. And at the peak when I was in the Army, my 2 mile was like 11 minutes or something. I was running like 6-minute miles. And so I knew I was really athletic. And I was like, man, whatever. Like, if you don't want me, like, I'll go somewhere else. And I did. And then, so I walked away. So Marines missed out. And I went to Concord, and then that was my recruiting station. And I got shipped out from San Jose. I went to MEPS in San Jose, and that's where I got shipped out from.
Mm-hmm. And then talk a little bit about like your early training and what were your initial thoughts, and I guess kind of what your duties were when you first got to training.
Yeah, so I went to basic. For the Army, it's called basic training. For the Marines, it's called boot camp, but it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And if you're in combat arms, like I was, so my MOS was an infantryman. So I don't know if you know what infantrymen do, but essentially what our job is to, neutralize and seize the enemy. That's what a infantryman does. And so because of that, we have something called OSET, which is, I think it stands for One Station Unit Training. Mm-hmm. So that means that all of our training is done at one base for infantrymen. So every infantryman who has ever been a part of the U.S. Army has graduated from Fort Benning, Georgia. That's where we train. And then, so I got shipped to Georgia. It's my first time, I think, getting on a flight. And I was supposed to be airborne. So that means I was supposed to jump out of planes. Wow. But I little did I know I was colorblind. I'm colorblind. So I didn't know that. And I found out when I was in the Army.
Really?
Yeah, so I was supposed to be airborne. And then I actually found out in MEPS. I was supposed to go. I went to the recruiter and I was like, I want to be an infantryman. I want to be in special operations. I want to, do this. I want to jump out of planes. And they're like, okay, let's see how fast you are. And then they did my whole physical assessment. And they're like, okay, you're pretty fit. Like, and you're not dumb. So we'll see, right? Like, we'll see. It seems like it's pretty good. And then, so I went, and then they do this test where they make you call out the colors. And I didn't know I was colorblind just because I just thought I wasn't good in colors. Like I thought, like in elementary school, some people aren't good with numbers, you're not good with math, you're not good with English, your grammar's off. I thought I just didn't pay attention with colors. Like it wasn't something that I paid attention to, so I would get them mixed up. So when I went through this, the first screening, and the recruiter was like, okay, well, let's do another screening. And then we did like 3 screenings. And I'm like, okay, this is not good. And then he comes back and he's like, you're colorblind. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you can't tell the difference between red and green. That's like kind of the category. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, so what does that mean? He's like, you can't jump out of planes. I was like, why not? He's like, because the light turns fucking green for you to jump. And if you jump when it's red, like it's not good. He's like, you can't tell the difference between those two. So you can't jump out of planes. And then I was like, okay, what does that mean for my military career? And he's like, well, I think I can't tell you, but you can definitely still be an infantryman. And I think that when you get to your unit, you can probably still go to Ranger School, and you can probably do these other, schools through the military. So We'll see. And then I was like, okay, so now fast forward to me getting shipped out to Benning. And then I was like, okay, it's my first time getting on a plane. And then I left with other recruits from the area. And obviously I'm not that tall. And I was the shortest one. And I was like, man, this is crazy. I remember I got my hair cut. It's very similar to what I have now. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I got it. Because they tell you get a fresh haircut. And I got there and I was like, okay, I have a fresh haircut. This is going to be, I hear all the horror stories. It's going to be tough. And then I was upset because then they just shave your head bald, right? So I was like, I paid for nothing. And then that was like my first impression of everything. And then, so what they do in basic training is that they strip you from everything. They strip you from any like notions that you had of people. They strip anything that you thought you were. They strip everything. So they make sure that they build you. So you end up learning, I don't know if they have taught you already, there's a couple of places where you get reinstitutionalized. One of those is the military. The other one is when you go to prison. And so what it is that they want to make sure that that they're in control and they build you from the ground up. So in order to build you, they have to break you down. So that's what it is. That's being reinstitutionalized. And if you have some like preconceived notions of like you're a hard ass, that's going to change really fast in the military. So, you know, I got there and they start stripping you. So the first couple of days is processing. It's like the first week is processing, which essentially is just, you know, your admin work, who you are, your blood work, you know, are you allergic to things, things like that. You're actually essentially an assembly line. You're going through an assembly line. You're getting like 5 vaccines in each arm. And yeah, so they're stripping you of all your clothes, your phone, you have no contact with anyone. And then they give you new clothes. They cut all your hair. So you're just a last name at that point.
Yeah.
And then so that's how it is. And then they mix you up, and then you're with some people, and then you're just talking to other people from all over the country, so all over the world too. So you're meeting new people, and it was the first time I met people from like the South. I met people from like all over the place, and it was really interesting, man. It was a good experience. I remember I became really good friends with some guy from Mississippi, and it was just a whole different world. You know, I grew up here in the Bay Area, so whenever we wanted fun, we'll go to like San Francisco, or we'll come to Oakland, Berkeley. We'll go to, you know, Stinson Beach, or drive to LA, or like we'll do something fun. Mm-hmm. And he was like, yeah, I'm from Mississippi. Like, we go muddying. Like, you know, I was like, what is that? What is muddying? And then, you know, it was a culture shock for both of us. And then it was a good time. So I did that, went to basic. And I guess one of the things that I've noticed, one thing I guess like memorable at basic was just, I got assigned to a platoon, and then I can't remember what platoon it was, but or what unit I was. I think it was 287. That's what it was called. The unit that I was in basic, and then I had a pretty good group of guys. They were all really nice, pretty diverse, a couple of hard asses. Who you know, there was people from Brooklyn, there was people from New York who were from like the hood. And there was people here from Oakland, there were people from Richmond, and it's super interesting because we're from all over the country, but we all kind of understood each other, and we kind of understood, you know, the situation we were in, and we all kind of got along. And we used to get smoked. So getting smoked is physical discipline. Is when you do something, it's a corrective action. It's like they start making you do push-ups, and they make you run things. And with this one time, I had this called ND, a negligent discharge, which means that you shoot when you're not supposed to shoot, and that's a big red flag. That was a big red flag. But I was on the prone, and I was on the range, and I was just learning. It was the first time I shot a gun. Was a M4. So I'd never shot a gun. I didn't know how it was. So I was scared every time I carried it. And so I was in the range. I was on the prone, and then they're like, okay, so whenever you're done shooting, they're like, clear your gun. So you clear it. And then they make you do a dry fire, which is just shoot nothing, just to make sure there's nothing there's nothing in the barrel or anything like that. So I forgot, I got nervous, and then I took out my magazine. No. So you're supposed to pull the bolt back. Have you ever shot a gun?
No.
You know, so you pull the bolt back, and when you pull the bolt back, you let it go, and then the bolt moves forward. So when the bolt moves forward, it grabs another round. So this is your magazine. There's rounds in the magazine. So you pull the bolt forward, and this has a spring that's pushing the rounds up. It goes like this, and it pushes it in. So you're supposed to pull out, and then when you pull it out, what it does is it pulls out the round that's there. Mm-hmm. So you're supposed to pull out the magazine first, and then make sure there's nothing there. And then if there's a round in there, when you pull the bolt back, it's supposed to shoot it out. Not shoot it out, but like push it out, reject it, right? And then, so what I did was that I did it the opposite, where you're supposed to take out the magazine first. But what I did was I pulled the bolt back, and then I let it go. So what that did was I loaded a round, and then I took out the magazine. So there was a round in the barrel. And then I shot it. And then they were like, who the fuck was that? Yeah. And I was like, and then none of my friends wanted to say anything. And I love them for that. But no one said anything. And I was like, damn, we're all going to get smoked right now. One, because I did that. And two, because no one wants to speak up. Yeah. So I just like raised my hand. And we had a drill sergeant who was a part of the special forces. And this dude was mean.
Mm-hmm.
This dude was like a hard, mean. He was like 6'2". He was like built like a freaking rhino. And I don't know why he was there, because if you're special forces, you're only there if you're getting training, because special forces, you deploy all the time. Mm-hmm. So the rumor has it, and there's all these rumors that are usually BS. Rumor had it that he did something really bad. So as punishment, they're like, you're going to be a recruiter. So everyone was scared of him.
Yes.
And I see him walking over to me with no facial expression, just these dark glasses. And he walks over to me. He looks at me, and I raise my hand. He snatches my rifle. Oh, and then he just like goes like this, and no words. You're usually getting screamed at, right? By these like hats. You're usually being screamed at. And he didn't say a word, so it made it even more frightening. And then he just like goes like this, snatches my rifle, walks, and then I see my drill sergeant walking over towards me. He's like cussing and screaming, and I'm just like, fuck. And then he just starts smoking me. So we were at the range for like the whole day, because we do. He had me running like 100 yards back and forth for the whole day. Oh. Yeah, and it was on gravel, so unstable gravel. So if you ever like gone running on gravel, it's hard. Yeah. Because like, you have much more traction. And like, so I was doing that, and then he had me do push-ups until muscle failure, and then he had me doing jump jacks, and then burpees, and then sit-ups, and then I think that was the only time I thought about quitting. And it was because I was so tired and so burnt out, and I was like, man, it was so humiliating, because I was in front of the whole platoon, and everyone was just like, and then one of my friends was making fun of me when I was doing it, and it's hella funny because he's like, damn, you messed up, Rosales. And then the drill sergeant's like, oh, you think it's fucking funny too? Join him. And then he joined me, and then we were doing that the whole day. Yeah, we were doing that the whole day. So that's.
Did he care that it was, you're just learning, it was your first time shooting?
No, they don't care. No, they don't care. They don't. That's the thing about the military. They're just kind of like, you're just essentially an asset. Like, that's what it is. Like, you mess up, you better learn. And then, it's basically during basic training and boot camp. So it was an experience. It was an experience, something that I lived through that I would never trade it for anything. And I think that like, if I had to really relive my life, like I would do it again, just because, I feel like I set the foundation to who I am and my drive.
Yeah. And then I guess, can you talk about like your first deployment and kind of what your first assignments were, I guess when you got out of training?
Yeah. So my first assignment was Fort Drum. I was stationed at Fort Drum, and I never deployed, but there's a story that goes to that. So when we went home after basic training, you can go home for the holidays. And then I was supposed to be assigned to my unit in January. So it was like the last time I hang out with all these random people who I went to basic training with, and we were all going to go home, be with our families, come back, and then be assigned. Yeah. And right before we left, they told us, like, you're going to be with us. They told us what unit we were in. They told us what base, but not what unit we were going to be a part of. So they told me, okay, you're going to be at Fort Drum. And then I was like, okay, Fort Drum, cool. And where's that? And they're like, that's in New York. And I was like, damn, I'm from the West Coast. Like, that's a lot. Like, I won't see my family that often. I remember that's all I thought. And then there was this guy, a buddy of mine. I won't say his name, but there was a buddy of mine who he was younger. He was 1 year younger than I was. So I was 18, he was 17. His parents had to sign a waiver. And he was also one of like the smaller Latin dudes. So we used to stick together. And he was a little bit shorter than I was, which says a lot. And then, throughout the whole basic training, he would just kind of go with me. And then whenever he essentially, I'd be like, it's okay. Like I was like his big brother. And then we were both assigned to Fort Drum. And he was like, damn, man. So we went home. And then at home, we finally got access to our phones. Yeah. And then I followed the U.S. Army and the U.S. military like newsletter and stuff. So I went online, and I saw that Drum was deploying to Afghanistan. And then, so Drum was a active base who deployed all the time. So I saw that. So you start seeing who's deploying for that upcoming spring, and Drum was one of them. So I was like, okay, it's most likely we're going to Afghanistan. Like that's my unit. I'm going to be deployed as soon as I get out of here. And then, so we got back. And then my friend was all like, oh, did you see? And I was like, yeah. He's like, we're deploying. And I was like, yeah. And then he was like super scared. He was 17, we were kids.
Yeah.
We were kids, right? Like, how old are you?
16.
Yeah, so like
Can
what?
you imagine?
Yeah, next year going to war.
Exactly. And then, we were kids. We had just learned how to shoot a gun.
Yeah.
Right. And then, and so we were scared. And I was like, it's all right. I was like, dude, it's okay. Like, I've been watching your back this whole time. Like, you watch my back, I'll watch your back, and we'll take care of each other.
Yeah.
Like, we'll go. We're not going to know people, but we're going to barely get to know these people. So these teams, we're not going to know these fighting teams. We're not going to know these people, but we know each other. And I've had your back, you've had my back, so we'll take care of each other, when we're out there.
Mm-hmm. So
we get a drum. And then I get to my unit. And then, so I get to the battalion. Our whole group gets to the battalion. I don't know if you know where Drum is. It's in freaking upstate New York. It's like north of Syracuse. We're closer to the Canadian border than anything. And then, so we get there super snowy. And then it's like we're snowed in, and I'm at the battalion, and we're all at the battalion. We're waiting for our companies to come and pick us up. And then, we're at the brigade, which is higher than the battalion. We're at the brigade, and then we're waiting for our units to pick us up. And then, so I'm with my friend, and then we're just waiting. And I start seeing that we're not all going to be in the same unit.
Oh, jeez.
They're starting to pick each other, like they're picking us apart. And I'm like, okay. And then it's towards the end, so I see that some people are getting assigned to the same unit with their friends, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna, And I see other folks getting picked up, and they're like, damn. And then I start getting anxious because no, they're not calling my name, right? And then I'm like, damn. And then towards the end, like they call my friend, and then and I'm like, fuck. Like, does that mean that like we're not in the same unit? And then I'm the last person they pick up.
Oh, no.
Really?
Yeah. So they pick me up, and it's like quiet on my ride back to my unit. Like the guy's not talking to me, and I'm just like, damn, what does this mean? Like, I'm thinking about my friend, and I'm thinking about like, okay, I'm alone. Like, there's no one else that I'm gonna start this. Like, I'm joining this group that I don't know anyone, and there's no one. I don't have a battle who I want to basic with who knows me, and I'm just like kind of thrown in. I get to my unit, and then it's quiet, and I'm like, why is it so quiet? Turns out that my unit's actually in Afghanistan already.
Oh.
So they're already in Afghanistan. And then they usually send people in rear D, that's what they call them. People who were left behind for some reason. They send left behind in the States. They send more folks to the people who are deployed. And but those people who they had sent them like 3 months before. So that meant that I wasn't going to go to Afghanistan anymore. So it was kind of luck. It was just completely luck that the last people who they were going to send out, they had sent out like 3 months before. And then, so that wasn't me. And then, so everyone was supposed to deploy when I was in my unit. And then I ended up seeing my friend. And then I was like, man, like, because we were going through processing. And I'm like, man, like people on my unit's deployed right now. Like, I'm not, like, like, I don't know what's going to happen. Deployments are every 3 years. My contract is 3 years. I only have 2 years left. Like, I'm never going to be deployed unless another unit grabs me and I go. And he was like, I'm deploying in 6 months. And then I remember I was just kind of like, didn't know what to tell him. And then he was like, yeah, it's all right though. Like, my people in my unit are pretty cool. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, let me know. We hanged out. And then, that's how my first unit was I got there, I was in upstate, and, I was kind of like alone.
Yeah.
And then like a lot of my friends from basic were in their groups. And then, yeah, that's how that kind of went.
And then what were kind of the next steps from there? Continuing the story, like what was your time at the base like?
It was a lot of training.
Yeah.
A lot of we'll be out in the field and just run like fake operations, and then we're like we'll do a lot of like clearing houses, searching. We'll do a lot of like field operations where we'll do like mock combat. We'll do a lot of like just shooting, a lot of training, a lot of clearing houses, because that's essentially all we did. Because it was snowing, we did a lot of cold weather training. I remember that we'll go on these these long distance runs, and I remember I used to get like frostbite in my lungs. And it was like the first time I ever experienced it. Yeah, I don't know if it was frostbite, but I would have like this aching pain in my lungs because it was too cold.
Yeah.
So, and then I'll remember getting stuck to the ice when we'll be on the prone position, just shooting, and then we'll start sweating, and then we'll just get stuck to the ice and stuff like that. So a lot of just dumb things and just training and just hanging out in the barracks. So, the thing about the military, at least when I was in, was that it was very much of like, you have all these young kids who have, are pretty buff.
Yeah.
And their egos are through the roof because they're running with guns all the time.
Yeah.
And they're giving like this set amount of money, and there's no adult supervision. And then they live in barracks, or essentially dorms. So it's like, think about like frats.
Mm-hmm.
Think about frats with like, just with guns, and it's a recipe for disaster. Like, I've seen some really dumb stuff. I've seen people get locked out from like the 4th floor, start stacking like these like tractor tires one on top of each other, start climbing windows just for they can get in, and like really dumb things that young people that do, and like it was dumb barrack parties. Like some dude ended up like bringing in like really dumb stuff, and it was that's a whole nother story. Just like, you have to be in formation at 6 a.m. There's times where people will like go out and drink and party, and then be back at formation be back in base like at 5:50, still drunk, be in formation at 6, and then we'll have to run like 10 miles.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
were you able to not keep in touch, but were you able to kind of track some of the people who did get deployed that you cared about, or that you maybe knew from basic training?
I did. So I ended up keeping track with a good amount of my friends. A lot of them deployed, and yeah, some of them passed away right after we got to our unit. A couple of months in, one of my buddies died through friendly fire. So he got killed during training, just because we were infantrymen, so we trained with live rounds all the time. And they were doing this, I guess they were doing, from my understanding, was that they were doing this training where they were kind of in these trenches. And then they were supposed to stop. So you have silhouettes that jump up. And then when you see a silhouette, you're supposed to shoot at it, right? You're supposed to be able to assess it fast and figure out like, this is an enemy, and then shoot it if you see like anything that falls under like our rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And from my understanding was that he was the lead in one of these firing teams. And then so if you think about it, like they're coming to an intersection, and then there's another fire team coming from this way. So you're going, and then you see silhouettes pop up. So you assess, and then you shoot. So what happened was that they were going at the same time, and then from my understanding was that my friend this fire team was supposed to stop, and then he didn't. So they kept walking, and they intersected, and then he just walked by, and then they thought it was a silhouette.
Yeah.
So yeah, that happened early when we got to our unit. So yeah, but I have a couple of friends who ended up being a part of the they were part of Ranger units, and those folks deploy all the time. So I mean, I ended up keeping track of a lot of folks. A lot of them kind of the friends who I went to basic with, who were from the Bay Area, I think none of them moved back They just kind of stayed, and they got married really young, had kids. And I don't think the folks who I still have on Facebook moved back to the Bay Area. So, yeah.
So did you stay in upstate New York like your whole contract, or
I
you
did.
move around?
No, I stayed in upstate New York.
So then when your contract was up, what was your next steps from there?
So I came back to the Bay. I came back in 2016. I remember my last day of of my unit was January. It was June. It was June 39 or 30. It was 31st or 29. Something like it was the last day of June. That was my last day, and then I got here on July 1st. July 1st was when I was officially a civilian, and then I remember that I came in, and it was just because when you're in the military, like there's all this structure.
Yeah.
And it's very different when you're a civilian to when you're in the military, because you live life through a different set of rules. Literally, you go through like the UCMJ, which is our kind of judicial system, and the way that bases are structured, which are very much like cities, are very different. There's different societal rules and stuff like that. So it's very different. It's very organized. So when you go, that's the first thing I've noticed when I tried to like reincorporate myself into like civilian world. I've noticed that I had a lot of trouble the first couple of months, and that's pretty common with a lot of veterans. I remember that because when you walk around in the unit, you try to be as respectful in base. You try to be as respectful as possible, because you never know who you're going to bump into. So you never know who you're going to cut off. If you cut off like the sergeant major or like the commanding officer or something, like you're going to hear about it. Like they can smoke you there at the grocery place. They can be like, do push-ups at the grocery place. Yeah. Like they can like make you run. Like you're at a store or something. They're like, okay, run home. You know, like that's the military. Like the military, you have no kind of like say. If you disobey direct orders, like breaking the law. So there's a lot of structure. And I remember that when I moved back, there's people bumping into me in the streets, and there was like, there's all these things going on at once. And then I remember I just remember being like, this is so chaotic. And I remember someone like bumping into me, and then like my initial reaction was like my reaction like when I was in base, which was like, who do you think you just bumped into? Like, who are you? And I was like, that's the first thing that popped into my head. And I was like, do you know who you just bumped into? And then I remember that like, I didn't say anything, but I just kind of stared at him. And then the guy was just kind of like, what are you looking at? And I was just kind of like, okay, this is a civilian world. Like, it's much more chaotic. There's no structure here. And that was daunting. It was kind of scary. It was just kind of like, wow. So I came back, and then I remember there was a lot of, also the other thing that I noticed, I was like, dude, I can sleep in. Like I can sleep in. I was like, damn, this is crazy. Like I can sleep in. Like I don't
Did your body let you?
No. Yeah. And this funny thing is that now I still don't sleep in. Like I wake up now at 4:50 every morning.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, because the office is in Vallejo. 4:50. I'm at the gym by 5:30. I work out for like an hour and a half, and then I read, I study, and then I'm online by 9. So, but at the time I was like, man, I want to sleep in. Like I want to hang out. I want to stay up late. Like this is crazy. Like I don't have to be anywhere.
Yeah.
Like this is
good and bad.
Exactly. I was like, I don't have to be anywhere. So that's what I've noticed. And that's what I noticed. The other thing that I noticed was that so when you come back and you visit as a service member, everyone's like, I want to see you. I want to hang out with you. And that's another thing that a lot of veterans kind of makes them feel like they made the bad decision, because they're used to that.
Yeah.
They're used to like, everyone wants to hang out. Everyone wants to be with me. But when you get back, people have lives. And then you get back and you're waiting to see people and you're waiting to hang out. And people are just like, okay, you're back. And then you're just like, you guys don't want to hang out? Like, you guys want to like just catch up? And they're like, no, I have things going on. And you're just kind of like I should have not left. That was my life. Like, I don't fit this life. Like my life that I left in the past is not here. And like, where, like, I don't have a life to come back to.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of veterans become like, you know, suicidal, just because like you leave the military, you had this structure, you had this respect, you had this honor, and then you come back and people are just kind of like, okay.
Yeah. It's not, none of that is integrated into your civilian life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
But you said, you know, I don't have to be anywhere, but that's not been the case.
Mhm.
Like, you've done a lot. We'd love to hear about what you're doing now and kind of tying, it sounds like, some of the experiences. So can you elaborate on that?
yeah. So right after, I mean, I got out in July 2016. I enrolled at Berkeley City College. It's literally down the street in August. So I was a student at Berkeley City within a couple of months. And then I started doing that. And then at Berkeley City, I became the president and the founder of a student leadership club. It's called Latin American Student Leaders. And then I was part of the veteran community on campus. I was part of a ton of things on campus, actually, a ton of just clubs. Also, at the time, which is super interesting, I started getting into politics. I realized that my life was kind of shaped because of political decisions.
Yeah.
Immigration reform, you know, gun reform, just everything in my life. You know, person of color from immigrant parents who grew up in a very predominantly like low income community.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that everything that I was a part of was involved in that. And then actually, I forgot to mention, when I was in high school, my first job was at a social justice youth center.
Mm.
So I was involved in a lot of like social justice causes in high school. So I knew about that.
Yeah.
And I knew about like how the odds were stacked against me. I knew about like institutional racism, and I knew about all these things going into it, right? So I came out and I was like, okay, I still have that, like, I need to fulfill I have a void. I need to fill that. Mm. So I started interning for, at the time, was Tony Thurman. At the time, he was assembly member of California from AD 15 Assembly, 15 Assembly District, 15th. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that district, but that covers exactly where we're at right now. Mm. It ranges from Berkeley all the way to like the East Bay, close to like Vallejo. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna intern for Tony. And then one of the field reps, Abel Pineda, who now is a city council member for San Pablo, he was his field rep, and he was a childhood friend of mine. Huh. So he was like, hey man, you just got out. I see that you're interested in politics. You should intern for our office. We have an internship. You should do it. And I was like, all right. And then I met Tony. He was the state assembly member at the time. And then I met other staffers. And that was kind of my step into government and politics. And I ended up helping out. I ended up volunteering after the internship. I ended up volunteering and worked for Tony in his campaign for California superintendent. And it was a very, very close race. He won. And that's the position he holds right now, 2022. Mm-hmm. And then after that, because he won, there was a vacancy in this assembly district. So then I ended up interning for Buffy Wicks, who she's now the assemblywoman for AD 15. Yeah. Hmm. And then so I interned for Buffy Wicks, and then I was like, okay, I like this. This is pretty cool. I'm starting to see how I'm with legislators. And because Richmond falls under that assembly district, they would ask me, like, Edgar, what do you think is happening right now? What do you think is the issue with Richmond? Like, you grew up in Richmond, who are the main actors? So in Richmond, one of the main actors is Chevron, the refinery, right? So you have the refinery there, you have, there's also like there's a couple of labor unions, there's, like what are the big issues, which is crime, violence. And I knew that just by growing up there. And then so I was able to communicate that to the member. And that's kind of how I was like, okay, I can see how change can happen because I'm there and I can speak for this community. And that's really what kind of motivated me. And then I ended up finding myself shortly after that interning for Congressman Mark Sonye, which handles that part of the East Bay, Richmond area. So I entered for Mark DeSagne, and then there I started getting more into like federal immigration issues, Department of Defense, and so VA. And then, because I was a veteran, I had the insight of the veteran community and the military. So I had that information. And so I started becoming very like intersectional in terms of, what I can specialize in. I can be a resource. And then I was at Cal, and then I got into Cal, and I was at Cal, and Cal kind of took a break in terms of internships, but at Cal, I majored in political economics, which is kind of how politics influence economics and economics influence politics. Mm-hmm. So, and then I graduated in December of 2020. So not too long ago, 2 years ago. And I graduated, at the peak of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I graduated at the peak of the pandemic, and it was very interesting. I think at the time it was very interesting because I graduated. I was living in Berkeley here, and that was during the Black Lives Matter movement.
Oh my goodness.
So I was in Berkeley during that time. I was, there's a lot of things that was happening. We had the pandemic, we had the Black Lives Matters movement, and the world just seemed like it was burning. One of the things I wanted to do with this interview was just like tell the story for hopefully I don't have no girlfriend, but hopefully my grandkids can look back. And hopefully the Black Lives Matter movement is something that they will read about in their history books. And that's something that, I protested. I went to a couple of protests in Richmond, a couple here in Berkeley. And, it was a very intense couple of weeks. And, I had a lot of friends who were pepper sprayed, and I was using, it was very interesting. I was using my military experience, to help them in terms of like, what do you do when you're pepper sprayed? Because we get pepper sprayed. What do you do? Like, how can you clean your eyes? Things like that. What if you get shot? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you put a tourniquet? How can you make a tourniquet? How can you stop like massive amount of bleeding, at least until you get to the hospital, and things like that. So that happened, and then I graduated, and then there's a fellowship program called the Wounded Warrior Fellowship Program through Congress. And this fellowship program is for folks who have a service-related disability. And so I applied for it, and then I got it, and that's where I'm at now. So I was assigned to Congressman Mike Thompson for California's 5th Congressional District, and that's where I've been working at since January of 2021, which was another very historical moment. I onboarded 3 days after the insurrection at the Capitol. So right after the situation happened at the Capitol, I started working in Congress. And so the member that I worked for was actually in one of the chambers when it happened. And my chief of staff was in there with him. So I remember them just walking me through the whole, how they had to get escorted and how like it was dangerous. I mean, we were getting calls. We were getting calls of like just being high alert. Like there was like, we'll go through the Capitol Police. So we have a pretty close, obviously we're well connected, and the Capitol Police will give us information of like, hey, this person in this area and where you live is pretty sketchy.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like there's
so they could have been part of people who were in DC, but they live in your district.
Exactly.
You should know about that.
Yeah, and there's like this person seems like he's made bombs before, things like that. Like you guys should be in very high alert. This is like
your first day.
Yeah, this is my first day on the job, and then my coworker was just like, "Yeah, man, like it's crazy right now. You joined politics at the most polarizing time and maybe one of the most polarizing times in U.S. history." So that's where I'm at now. I've been working, and just to kind of things I've done. So what I do now with Congress as a fellow is that I was brought to the team for I can specialize in VA, Department of Defense, Homeland, and USCIS, which is immigration. and be a liaison for the Hispanic community. And our district ranges from the north part of West Contra Costa, which is Pinole, Hercules, Rodeo, Crockett, all the way to Lake County. So we cover Napa, we cover Santa Rosa, some parts of Sonoma. So that's kind of the whole area we cover. And I'm supposed to be the Hispanic liaison for Solana and Contra Costa, as well as the veteran Department of Defense and Homeland Personal Specialist.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. That's what I was brought on to do. But things changed. And this past couple of months, I've been essentially the acting district director for our office.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, recently, these are all like very big historical things. So if you guys are listening, look these things up. Recently, the whole Afghanistan pullout.
Yeah.
So that's something that I was working with the Department of State with. So we have people in our district who were stuck in Afghanistan during this whole evacuation effort.
And they're civilians? Or
civilians. Yeah, there were civilians, U.S. citizens.
There?
Yeah, there was like U.S. citizens. There's also Afghan nationals who were allies to U.S. forces, and they were stuck there. And you know, I was coordinating with the Department of State to try to get these people out. And again, like I said, some of them were U.S. citizens, some of them were Afghan nationals who worked with the U.S. And I had communication with them and directly with them, had their coordinates, and I was giving that to the Department of State and trying to get them out. So I guess it comes full circle, right? Joining the military, you know, not deploying to Afghanistan and now helping people get out of Afghanistan. And yeah, I mean, it's been tough. It's been tough. And with the Biden administration, you know, we've tried, I guess that I think things just turned out, it wasn't what we expected. And, you know, I think the situation, this is my point of view, this is not what the member or anything, this is my point of view. I think that the situation in Afghanistan, personally, I think we should have never been there. And I think that, you know, it's much more complex than just going there and making a military. And I think that there's a lot of cultural, you know, issues that go way back before the U.S. was even established in those areas. And I think that, you know, those are something that doesn't get changed within 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know. And I think that, you know, we didn't plan it out as well as we should. And I want to say some of that has to do with the last administration.
Yeah.
With Donald Trump. So, yeah, I mean, we did the best we can, and we're still doing the best we can. And yeah, that's kind of that's one of the projects I worked on not too long ago, and that was in October, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I guess one question that we might have missed about the military, like when you left, what was your rank, and I guess did you have any awards like when you left?
No, so I was a private first class when I got out, and I didn't have any outstanding awards that I can think of. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. I guess we covered most of like what you're doing after the service. You talked a little bit about like what readjusting to civilian life was. So I mean, I think we covered most of it.
Yeah. Maybe we could just spend just a minute just understanding kind of with your time left in this fellowship, are there certain things that you'd like to focus on? I mean, you definitely had exposure to like refugees, certainly with Afghanistan, immigration policy, you know, obviously Black Lives Matter, being a person of color, you know, in the military. I mean, there's so many issues there. Is there anything that you would like to double click on kind of in that list? Or are there some things that you're like, actually, I really want to get time to something that it hasn't even been started?
Yeah, that's, I think that, that's a really good question. I think that I have one more year left in my fellowship, and I think that I'm going to use that time to just, you know, do the best I can with the veteran community and try to, right now I'm leading the members' Veteran Advisory Committee, and I think I'm going to try to, develop that a little bit more, get more information to the member in terms of legislation in that area of the district, and figure out, what the veteran community needs in our district. And I also would like to do, make just our resources more accessible to the Hispanic community, because I think there's a big language barrier between our the information that we have and what there's just that language barrier in trying to translate a simple translation of.
We could do that.
Exactly.
Right? Like that's fixable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing it's fixable and something that should be intuitive, I feel, but we have those barriers, and it's just communicating that. And we have a pretty diverse district. We have a lot of people from the Philippines who speak Tagalog. We have a lot of Latin people. We have a lot of people from France, from Italy. We have Napa, so we have a pretty diverse group. So I guess just making our services just more accessible to people. So that's one thing I'm going to be working on, and I think that I'm also applying to law school this year. So hopefully, after my fellowship, I'll be at a law school. And another thing that's happening right now that is worth mentioning is that we're going through redistricting. So we had the census, and then after the census, determining if there's any change in population, the congressional district, not just the congressional districts, but the districts of representation get redrawn. And so that's what we're going through. So the lines have been finalized, and the member I work with, he's going to move north. So he's going to cover, instead of Vallejo and Contra Costa, he's just going to do Napa, Fairfield, that area of Solano, Lake County, and all the way up to Davis. So I guess that gives me an opportunity to maybe possibly work with a new member that's going to be in Richmond, that's going to be in San Pablo, which are the areas I grew up in, and then work with him. And my goal is to give him essentially the information of these are the main players, these are our main issues, and this is what I think we can do, and this is what I think we can help them. I've been fortunate enough to be in government politics long enough that a lot of my friends have taken on elected official positions. So I can just easily give them a call and be like, hey, you should meet with a member, and you should tell him about what you think is going on and possible solutions. Especially, that's the area that I've worked with in terms of assembly. And so that's my goal for the next 2 years. It's get into law school and work with a new congressional member and try to have these issues communicated to them.